Welcome to tonight's live. My name is Djanie. I am an advanced hair, scalp, and skin practitioner, and I have been coming on live for the month of June. I actually think that I might continue this now because I've really enjoyed it. It's been my little thing that I do in the middle of the night or really late in the evening of talking to myself and sometimes some of you. And so I've been coming on live this month discussing matters to do with the hair, scalp, and skin. This week, I am focusing on the relaxer treatment as a chemical treatment. And so we're continuing with that. I've been off a couple of days, some family things, life happens. My daughter wasn't feeling very well, but she still isn't feeling too good. But I have got some time to come on and just talk a little bit about this subject. I have checked my settings and I'm sure that everything's working fine. You can see me and hear me, I hope. If that is a problem, please let me know. But so far, it looks like we are good. Okay, so I am not a doctor. I am not your doctor. I am here to discuss these subjects as informative and educational for you to consume and do with it as you wish. But I always have to caveat and say, if you require some personal bespoke advice about things that you're going through, my advice would be to seek someone who can help you directly. I'm just going to change the lighting a little bit because I'm not sure I like this one. Let's see if this one works better. Technical things are not my strong point, so please bear with me. Okay, so we had already discussed some things to do with relaxers, and I'm just continuing with this. So what do I do as a practitioner within this space? I help people in dealing with hair loss issues, scalp disorders, and skin problems. Okay, so this is what I do within my practice. I help people to manage their scalp disorders when it is plaguing them in general, but also if it's causing hair loss. I come in and I help to manage those conditions for them and give them a good canvas for them to be able to grow great quality hair, but also for them to be able to not find the discomfort that you sometimes find with hair and scalp issues. And then the skin issues is also where I come in to help people navigate their way through skincare, try and help them in trying to get a nice skincare regime going so that they can feel confident in their skin and just enjoy their lives, really. And so should you need any of these treatments, you can find me online on social media at Vegan Hair Salon UK, or you can find me on my personal pages, which is at Djanie. So we're going to continue with relaxers. I mentioned before in the previous lives that relaxers are chemical treatments. They are caustic treatments. They are treatments that people have for their own personal reasons to help them manage their hair, to help them have a more efficient lifestyle, to move on and be able to do things within their lives efficiently, because they just sometimes find it difficult to manage their own hair. Again, I am not here to judge anybody. I am not here to police what people are doing with their hair, and I don't want anyone else to do the same. Whatever people decide to do, it is their choice, and we must leave that choice to them to do that. What I'm here to do is to provide the information, the education, so that people can make the right decisions for themselves. But should they come to the conclusion that they no longer require or need to have relaxers as a way of managing their hair, I shall always be there to also help guide them into going to a more natural route. Tonight, I might discuss some alternatives also. Okay, so I've explained before that the relaxer is caustic. It is a chemical treatment. It's important that we realize that it is a chemical treatment. It has elements that can damage the hair, but it also has elements that can damage the scalp. If it isn't used properly, it can damage the hair and the scalp. So we must be sure that we are doing this correctly. The way to stop all of this from happening, trying to help yourself from scalp damage and hair damage, is to make sure that you're putting it in the hands of a professional who can help you do this properly, right? They are professional treatments anyway. So ideally or realistically, we shouldn't really be conducting these treatments at home. I'm just aware that people are doing so. But sometimes there are professionals who aren't trained in using relaxers. I found that when I got trained, the training on relaxer did not really happen. It just did not take place. So it is true that there are professionals out there who, unless they have engaged in continuous professional development, unless this is what they want to do and they want to become experts in their fields, they may not know how to use relaxers properly. Okay, so try to find somebody who's well educated, who's well trained, and is able to give you those treatments in a professional manner to prevent any of those chemical burns and hair damage. We have endocrine disrupting issues that can come because of the scalp damage that can occur when relaxers aren't applied properly. So when you've used a relaxer on yourself and you've ended up with chemical burns and things like that, you're opening the skin, so you're breaking the skin and you're allowing the product to seep into the skin. I'm going to bring my model up again. As per usual, we really haven't found a name for this model, so I'm still waiting for someone to suggest. But this is the skin. This is the skin. This is the top layers of the skin. This is the deeper layers of the skin. Your hair sits in the dermis of the skin. That is where it is alive, okay? But when it takes itself out of the stratum corneum, which is the outermost layer of the skin, right? It means that that hair is no longer alive. This part of the hair, this portion of the hair is no longer alive. And the hair is made of protein. It's made of a protein called keratin. It has got other bonds in it, other things in there. But truly what we like to talk about the hair in terms of its composition is that it has got high levels of protein in there. And so that is what we are discussing. The hair that is above that skin area, the epidermal, but then the stratum corneum. This is the epidermis. This is the dermis, right? And so at the topmost level is the stratum corneum. Now, when you break the stratum corneum of the epidermis, you run the risk of allowing these chemicals to seep into the layers of the skin, right? And that means that this toxic, caustic product will enter into the thicker areas of the skin. So it's truly important that we are aware that this is happening. When we are breaking the skin because we're leaving the relaxer on for too long, we are not doing all the things that we need to do, which professionals who have been trained would know to do. If we're not doing that, we are ending up with issues where the chemicals within the product has been broken. When the skin has been broken, those chemicals within the product can then seep into the layers of the skin and of course enter into your bloodstream. So truly, really quite important that we understand that. So treat relaxers with care. I've discussed that relaxers can be damaging to the hair, it can be damaging to the scalp, and also it can be damaging to the body. So what are the differences? We've discussed why professionals should do it for you and so on and so forth. Today, the discussion is about what the differences are. So you have the lye relaxers and you have the no lye relaxers. Okay. The lye relaxers, the active ingredients within that type of relaxer is called sodium hydroxide, right? And that is the active ingredient. That is what we call the lye. The no lye is the one that has got a different active ingredient in there, which is the calcium hydroxide. Usually the relaxers that you find in the stores that you can get your hands on are the no lye relaxers. So they're the ones without with the active ingredients, that is the calcium hydroxide. Okay, so it's really important that we understand what is going on here. Now, the lye relaxers are usually more aggressive to the scalp and gentle on the hair. And so that is the relaxer that tends to break the skin. Okay, it causes a scoriation of the skin, where we have the product seeping into the layers of the skin, right? It removes the layers of the skin and then the product can absorb into the skin, right? And we don't want that. So when you end up with chemical burns and they scab maybe a few days later, some people don't quite realize it, maybe because their sensory nerve endings are not as responsive, or perhaps they have done other things, or they just want their relaxers to relax their hair bone straight. And so when they are experiencing some discomfort with the relaxer, they don't respond and they leave it for it to continue working. And so what happens is you end up with scalp burns, which are chemical burns, which can also cause scabs, okay, which further can lead to hair loss, okay. But then we also have the issues that can happen because of the way that the relaxer product itself, can encourage some hair loss in certain people also, and in certain conditions. So the lye relaxers are the relaxers that are aggressive on the scalp, but gentle on the hair. The no lye relaxers are the opposite. So they switch around. They are gentle on the scalp, but aggressive on the hair. But also what they do, which is quite important to understand, is that they leave a calcium coating on the hair strands. And so the hair can then become brittle and dry. Okay, so people mention that, oh, I've had a relaxer and it seems a bit stiff. Usually it's because of the relaxer that has been used. And so there are times when we find that we have to use a lye relaxer to remove the calcium buildup that we have experienced from a no lye relaxer, right? And so I sometimes advise professionals who may be wanting to continue doing relaxers and offering it as a treatment, that if you do all the preparations first adequately, you may find that you may not need to use a no lye relaxer. Because if you need to remove calcium in the hair and you're choosing to use another relaxer to remove the calcium, which again is very strong, why don't you make sure that you do the preparation, especially if the client's hair that you're doing is the right candidate to have a relaxer, then perhaps doing the right preparations could help you in making sure that the outcome of the relaxer treatment is what the desired outcome should be, right? So making sure that the candidate is the right candidate for a relaxer, doing the right protocols to ensure that you're having a successful outcome is truly important. And then obviously, if you realize that the client really cannot cope with a relaxer, it begs the question why they should be having a relaxer in the first place, is my question. But if they can't cope and they're insisting on having it, or whatever reason you want to proceed, then you need to consider using a no-lie relaxer. There are other ways of removing this calcium buildup from the relaxer without using another relaxer, right? So without using a lie relaxer, you can remove the calcium in other ways. And we can clarify the hair, for example. We can use other treatments to do that, but that's a professional area that perhaps, you know, doesn't need to be discussed. That's a different area altogether. I might do a video on that another time. Okay, so the lie relaxers, they work so quickly. They're quite aggressive, and they go in there and they work so quickly. I've mentioned before that relaxers are not for the scalp. They're for the hair and not the scalp. And certainly if you're using a lie relaxer, you most certainly do not direct it at the scalp. Okay, it must be worked to the hair. Eventually, you know, just by the principle of the fact that you're relaxing the hair, it will end up on the scalp, but we don't start by application to the scalp because it is quite aggressive and it works really quickly, and it may cause burning sensations as well. But what we find is that it makes the hair itself become softer, and it doesn't have that brittle effect as we would get with the calcium hydroxide relaxer, which is the no-lie relaxers. Okay, the hair is softer, it doesn't leave a residue over it, and so usually people will pick to have a lie relaxer, but then don't do the right protocols. I have mentioned all the protocols to do to engage in for a relaxer, so it's in the previous videos, and so you can watch that and get to know about what to do if you're a professional, or you get to know what your professional should be doing for you when you're going to get your relaxer treatments. Okay, so then you've got the no-lie relaxers, which is less burning. So it doesn't burn. It never actually burns. But what you do get is an itching sensation. So it starts to itch. Now, it doesn't mean that just because it's not burning, we ignore the itch, because the itch is almost a prelude to a burn. It can still burn if the scalp is not in the right condition for a relaxer to have been applied onto the hair, right? And so just because it's just itching, we don't ignore the itch, right? We make sure that we have the right protocols to follow. I always say this to professionals, or to the general public, which is that, you know, finding the right person to do the chemical treatments and the technical treatments for you isn't just about, you know, placing, you know, these very highly technical treatments in the hands of a professional. It's not just simply that. It's truly also about, what do you do when things go wrong? What would you do if you are not a professional, start to engage in these professional treatments and things go wrong? Would you know what to do? Would you know how to counteract some of these reactions that are undesirable, painful, you know, causing issues in people's scalps and hair and their bodies, and really causing harm? You're offering these treatments, but do you actually know what to do? You're offering them, or you're conducting these treatments. Do you know what to do when things go wrong? Okay, so relaxers will break down the hair. We know what they're going to do. They're going to loosen the curls. They're not supposed to give your hair the bone straightness that we think we need. That's not what a relaxer, or that's not what the manufacturer intended it to do. And so when you leave the relaxer on for too long, you run the risk of going against what the manufacturer instructions are, and you're damaging your hair, because that's not truly what it should be doing. We've spoken about the pH scale of the relaxer. We've spoken about where it sits, right? That's the potential hydrogen. That's the pH. pH means potential hydrogen of a relaxer, and we've mentioned where it sits on the pH scale, which is a very alkaline area of the pH scale. So it isn't something to play with at all. Okay, now we've spoken about relaxers, what you should be doing with them, what the options are, right? Another thing that you mustn't do is to manipulate the hair and the scalp when you've got the relaxer on. You mustn't manipulate the hair and scalp because it does not matter. The relaxer will work as it's supposed to do, okay? By the principle of applying it to the hair, it starts to work. It starts to do what it's supposed to do. Your manipulation of lack or lack thereof isn't going to determine what's going to happen to the hair, right? You just make sure that it's meticulously applied, it is a neat application, and that you are being intentional in the way that you're applying it. You're applying enough on the hair and to make sure that it's actually going to process well within the processing time. Okay, so really no manipulation is required. I remember when it used to be a thing that you put the relaxer in your hair and you wait until it starts to burn, and you know the hairdresser will say to you, let me know when your relaxer's burning, and they leave you to it, and then you tell them when it's burning. That's not the way to go at all. I promise you. You mustn't engage in a relaxer treatment and wait for it to burn before you start to do anything to it, or to start to get it, take it off. And then there was another thing that people used to do, which was to take painkillers before they attend the hairdressing salon, because they want to make sure that they can not feel the pain of the burn of the relaxer. Absolutely mind-blowing. But, we have all done silly things, but when we know better, we should do better. And this is a situation where we now know better, so we most certainly must do better. We know what the relaxers are. We know how strong they are. We know what they can do to our bodies and our scalps and our hair. And so why must we deal with it? Why must we handle it with such carelessness, right? We just must be very, very careful. All right. So I want to discuss other things that you can do to help yourself if you don't want to have a relaxer, the alternatives to having a relaxer, right? So heat management is a thing that is a great thing if you are not, you're somebody who are not wanting to have a relaxer. You can train your hair without damaging the hair to respond to heat, to become manageable, for you to manage the hair properly. So this is making sure that you are using heat in a responsible manner, in a responsible way. Okay? You are applying heat to your hair at frequent intervals, but you are ensuring that you're doing, again, the right protocols to make sure that you're not going to end up with rips, tears, and split ends, right? And how do we do that? You make sure that your hair has got all the nutrients that it needs to go in from the outside in. So we're talking good balance of protein and moisture. You're hydrating the hair when it's needed. You're masking the hair in the right conditioning treatments to make sure that it is fed. You're feeding your hair, basically. And then when you're applying the heat, you're protecting the hair. So you're cleansing the hair, you're treating the hair, and you're protecting the hair, right? I call that the CTP method, which is cleanse, treat, and protect. You just make sure that that is done, and then you're being cognizant of the fact that you're using heat. And so you use the right temperature of heat to the outcome that you're expecting, and use that consistently throughout the hair, right? And so by doing these steps in this way, you're making sure that you've done all the prep work. So the degradation of proteins that will occur with misuse of heat isn't going to occur, right? So you may lose some proteins in the hair, but if you're treating the hair and you're looking after the hair and you're replenishing the hair before you start anything, you will find that hair that is in a stretched state, that has been kept in a stretched state, whether heat application has been involved or not, that hair can still remain healthy, right? So when I mention healthy hair, I need people to understand where I'm coming from with this, because healthy hair can be subjective depending on where you're looking at, what you're looking at. I have got clients who have got healthier, relaxed hair that is abundant, growing, scalp care is great, the hair itself is not splitting, we have got a good stretch and return in the hair, okay, so the integrity of the hair is actually there and it's great. But then I could have a client or a patient who has natural hair that is damaged, that is splitting, damaged completely, it's got rips and tears in it and hasn't been looked after, and it's got different shapes and curl patterns all over. And so the health of the hair is something that is subjective, is what is healthy for you or for your hair type. By the same token, I have patients and clients who, because they're natural, they're not washing their hair and scalp as often as they should do. And so their hair is not healthy, their scalp is not healthy, right? But then I have patients and clients who have got relaxed hair, who really look after their hair well. They're able to cleanse their scalp, treat their hair more often because their hair is in a stretched state and it's been relaxed, so the curls have been loosened somewhat. Okay, so it's really quite important that we understand that the health of the hair has to be something that you determine for yourself, right? And it is person specific. It is based on so many moving parts: who you are, what you do, where you're coming from, how much length you've been able to retain, depending on what sort of protocol you've been using, or what you are, whether you're a natural or a relaxed person. So we need to realize that the marker to what is healthy is subjective. Okay. And so relaxers are there, but we have other alternatives, which are to use heat to help the hair become more manageable, so that you can comb through the hair more often, and then you can also treat the hair and look after the hair more often, especially if it means you're looking after your scalp better. Then that is also a win-win. But there are other treatments, such as keratin treatments and amino acid treatments. Again, they're about the same in sort of the way they work. Some people talk about keratin treatments and they don't understand how it actually works. Keratin treatments are not supposed to act like relaxers. They are supposed to be products that are placed on the hair, usually heat activated, but then can be washed off over a period of time. They don't relax the curls, so they don't drop the curls, but what they do is they coat the hair and they smooth down those hair cuticles. So the cuticles are the layers of the hair that are like the scales of a fish, for example. So when the scales of the fish is tightly packed, we have the scales of the hair rather is tightly packed, we say that the hair is low porosity. But when the scales of the hair is raised, right, and open, we say that the hair is of high porosity, right? And so what a keratin treatment will do is, if you have high porosity hair, which becomes frizzy, hard to manage because there's a charge on it. So when we have frizzy hair, it's because the hair itself has either gained or lost an electron, for example, right? So it has gained or lost an electron, and because of that, there's a charge on the hair. There is somewhat of a charge on the hair. And so the hair becomes frizzy, and it means that the cuticle areas are raised, or that the hair cannot be smooth enough. So when you blow dry the hair, it doesn't stay smooth for too long. So what we're doing is, with the keratin treatment, is that we are smoothing down those cuticles and making sure that the frizz is not happening as quickly as it could do. And perhaps you're having long-lasting blow dries, for example, and you're making sure that you're able to, look after the hair without tearing through it, because the frizz can sometimes cause pulling and tugging on the hair itself, which can then cause breakage, and the hair ends up becoming damaged. So by smoothing down those cuticles of the hair strands, you're making sure that the hair is gliding against one another really nicely and smoothly, rather than catching on one another. So when they're catching on one another, you're ending up with a webbing effect. But when they're gliding on each other, it helps in terms of managing the hair. And one particular treatment that smooths the hair, that also is more on the moisturizing spectrum. So it also has amino acids in there, but it moisturizes the hair also, is called a texture release. Now that product is good for people, especially for Black people with Afro hair and Hispanic hair types, because what it does is, now again, it's exactly the same caveats that I have here. You have to be sure of who's using it for you and how trained they are in using it, because it can effectively treat the hair like a relaxer. And so people think they're not having a relaxer, but if it's not handled with care, it can break down those bonds in the hair and permanently change the bonds in the hair, which then becomes like a relaxer. But what that's supposed to do, the texture release is supposed to do, is again similar to, it sits in that sweet spot between a relaxer and a keratin treatment, because what it's doing is it is loosening those curls and also smoothing the hair down as well. So smoothing down those cuticles and relaxing those curls. But when it's done properly, and the person makes sure that they've followed the instructions properly and they've applied the heat accordingly, what happens is that you're able to basically, over a period of time, wash the product off the hair. So we say that these treatments, the keratin treatments and the amino acid treatments, like texture release, for example, can stay in the hair up to 12 weeks. Now, the 12 weeks mark is that you're washing your hair once a week, 12 times. And that by the 12th time, you should expect that the product, there's less of the product in the hair. So it coats the hair shaft and smooths the hair shaft down. But so by the 12th week, you start to notice that the hair is starting to revert back to its frizzier nature. Okay, which means that you need to reapply, right? So you have to go back and get this treatment done again to keep that hair cuticle smoothed down. Now, over application without proper care can cause a permanent change in the disulfide bonds. So the disulfide bonds are the sulfur to sulfur linkages. So we have two, which is the reason why it's called disulfide bonds. And what they do is they keep the strength, the core strength of the hair in place. And those are what we change when we relax the hair, right? And so if your keratin treatment or your texture release treatments aren't handled properly, they're not handled properly, we will end up changing those sulfur to sulfur linkages in the hair. So it's really important that we observe these factors about the treatments that we're getting done. Okay, so you may be avoiding relaxers, but you might find that the options that you're using are also relaxing the hair as well. Okay, so be mindful of that. So again, I've spoken at length about this. I've said some things to do with the lye relaxer, some things to do with no lye relaxers, what the differences are, how the hair responds to it. I have caveats. I've started the conversation discussing what a relaxer does to your hair, what it can do to your scalp, what it can do to your body. Again, a no judgment zone here. If you still insist on having a relaxer, you must seek the right person who is well educated, highly trained in handling chemicals of this type so that they can conduct it for you properly. Yes? And so we've also discussed things to do with alternatives. When the hair has been heat trained, it can become more manageable. Heat training the hair and heat damaging the hair are two very different things, and people use them interchangeably without fully understanding that you can heat train hair that does not become damaged, right? So although the hair has been heat trained, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is damaged. Okay, so heat training the hair is something that can happen. Again, I've explained, if you haven't treated the hair properly, you've not cleansed the hair properly, you've not protected the hair properly, you will end up breaking those bonds in the hair and permanently changing the structure of your hair. And then we have issues where rips and tears and split ends can occur. So be mindful of those things. And then we've discussed the other alternatives, which are the keratin treatments and the amino acid treatments, which also help in managing the hair for you, but they're not relaxers. They are not permanent unless they have been misused. Then they are permanent. But if it's been handled properly, following the manufacturer's guidelines, with the hair being treated prior, it's really good at helping manage the hair for you. All right. So I'm going to end here, but I hope that this has been informative. I don't know if I can do another one about the relaxers. I might do, I'm not sure. We'll see what happens tomorrow, but it is almost the last one of the month, the last live of the month, and I've truly enjoyed it. It has been a whirlwind. I've actually enjoyed doing these. I have learned a lot about myself, and yes, everyone who has joined in and has asked questions and has watched either live whilst I'm doing it or rather when I have posted the video and commented, I truly appreciate all the support and the questions that have come in. I hope that I have answered all of them, but if there are more, I will still answer them. So please put your questions in the comments below the videos that you see, and I will answer them for you. I envisage continuing these lives because I've truly enjoyed them. And so as we move on, if you have more questions, I'll set a program that will show when I'll be live, and your questions will still continue to answer those questions for you, just to help you manage your hair, scalp, and skin much better. Okay, so on that note, I like to say, be kind to yourself, look after yourselves, and good night and goodbye.